Revenge is a dish best served cold. But what if it takes 10 years to prepare? Ryan Carter sat in his high-rise office, staring down at the city below, a smirk playing on his lips. Today was the day he had been waiting for, the day Richard Vaughn lost everything. His hands tightened around the glass of whiskey as he thought about how it all began. 10 years ago, he had been nothing but a hopeful young engineer, brimming with ambition and loyalty. He had trusted the wrong man, and that mistake had cost him everything. But unlike most people, Ryan didn't just accept his fate, he rewrote it. Ryan had been one of the top engineers at Titan Tech, an empire built by billionaire Richard Vaughn, a man who saw people as pawns and loyalty as a weakness. Ryan had developed a groundbreaking AI system that could revolutionize the tech industry. When he presented it to the board, Richard had smiled, shaken his hand, and promised him a future filled with wealth and recognition. But that future never came. Instead, Richard stole his idea, took full credit for it, fired him under false allegations, and made sure he'd never work in the industry again. Ryan went from a rising star to a man who couldn't even get a job interview. His bank accounts were frozen, his reputation shattered, and even his fiancée, unwilling to stay with a failure, left him, homeless, broke, and humiliated. Ryan had one thing left: rage. But anger alone wasn't enough. He knew Richard was untouchable. The legal system was on his payroll, and anyone who crossed him ended up destroyed. Ryan realized that the only way to take down a monster like Richard Vaughn was to become something far worse. That's when the real game began. He disappeared from the corporate world, taking up odd jobs under different identities, learning everything he could about business, finance, and deception. He studied Richard from the shadows, watching his weaknesses, his arrogance, and most importantly, the people he trusted. By the third year, Ryan had carefully built a new identity: Daniel Cross, a wealthy investor from overseas. Using offshore accounts and forged credentials, Daniel started making waves in the corporate world, earning the trust of powerful businessmen. He bought small tech companies, made strategic investments, and waited. By the time he resurfaced, he wasn't just some disgraced engineer, he was a ghost with power, money, and an agenda. In year 5, Titan Tech faced a crisis. A major investor pulled out, and the company desperately needed funding. That's when Daniel Cross stepped in, offering a $50 million investment. Richard, greedy and desperate, welcomed him with open arms, unaware he had just invited a viper into his den. Within a year, Daniel was one of the company's biggest stakeholders and had access to its financial records, secret dealings, and corruption. He played his role perfectly: loyal, supportive, and most importantly, completely non-threatening. Richard trusted him, and that was his biggest mistake. By year 7, Ryan had manipulated Richard into cutting off key allies, isolating himself from the board. He convinced him to sign shady deals, making Titan Tech vulnerable to government investigations. He leaked classified documents anonymously, feeding the authorities enough breadcrumbs to start looking into the company's financials. Slowly, Titan Tech's foundation started to crack. By year 10, everything was set. The final blow came in a single, devastating move. Ryan orchestrated a massive stock crash by leaking confidential data to the media, sending investors into a panic. Within 48 hours, Titan Tech's value plummeted by billions. Government agencies raided the offices, uncovering fraud, tax evasion, and insider trading, all under Richard's name. His assets were frozen, lawsuits piled up, and in a matter of days, the once untouchable billionaire was reduced to nothing. And then, when Richard thought it couldn't get any worse, Ryan delivered the final blow. He walked into the Titan Tech boardroom, the very same place where Richard had destroyed his life a decade ago, and took his seat at the head of the table. With a smirk, he slid a folder across the table. "Your company is bankrupt. Your stocks are worthless. Your name is a joke. But don't worry, Richard," he said, leaning in. "I just bought what's left of Titan Tech, and I need a janitor." Richard's face turned pale as the realization hit him. He had just lost everything to the man he thought he had destroyed. And Ryan? He had won the ultimate revenge.